I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to bring in Brandon Penner, and we're going to talk a little bit about his updates with version 3. Hey, Brandon. How you doing?
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you too. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. So it's been a year now, Brandon. You've been using PHDwin, hopefully version 3 for a year. You still using version 3?
I'm still using version 3, so still
Good.
My favorite programs list.
All right, good. So in case y'all hadn't catch any of my lead-in for this, last year Brandon did a segment, a session about his move from version 2 to version 3. And I think you did a really good job talking about your learning curve, Brandon, and what you liked and what were some things that were difficult for you as you moved in that version of the program. Just as a little review, because Don Olson popped up and he just kind of wanted me to ask you before we get into your update, back to that transition, what was the single most difficult part for you, do you think?
I think the most difficult part was, and don't take offense to this, but V2 had a lot of nuances. Certain pathways, workflows to accomplish something that in my brain thought, man, this should be really simple to change this feature or change this, input, apply this deduct. I mean, there's all these little nuances that once you learn them, they're easy. And in V3, you had similar workflows, but that just said they're similar, not exact. And so things that had become very straightforward for me in V2 suddenly required most of the same steps, but maybe one extra step or one less step or one more, a different click in a different area. And so learning those workflows to, I could generally get the right box up, but there's still a learning curve to figure out how to grid edit properly, how to global edit properly, and make sure that the changes are applied correctly. And so, but overall, it streamlined some certain workflows, made forecasting a lot quicker, and just the whole structure of the program has enabled my engineering workflows and analysis workflows to become more straightforward and simple.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in. Well, let's give everyone an update. So what's going on with you? What's going on with your career? And what's going on with your usage of V3?
Thanks. Yeah. Back in spring of last year, or this year, I joined Giant Capital, and it's an energy investment fund manager. We have an office in Tulsa and Houston, and similar to a private equity company, but we have an operations arm called Tamworth Resources, drilling deep wells in Blaine County, Oklahoma. And then we also have a non-operated fund and a royalty fund. And so we're managing different energy investments. And in my role there, help with all three funds some, but a lot of focus on the royalty and the non-operated investment side. So day to day, using PHDwin is analyzing all sizes of mineral deals and non-op working interest deals that come through. And so a lot more deal flow volume wise than I've done in the past. And using V3 primarily to work through that.
Well, that's perfect. That's perfect. So you're going through a lot of data. You're probably going through a lot of packages. You look at non-op. You're going through a lot of individual cases. I'm assuming a lot of scenarios. What kind of features are you currently using a lot in version 3?
Just talking through like a deal analysis workflow. We'll get a deal for a certain section, minerals, and usually use Enverus to do the mapping and data collection to get export of data from Enverus, get it into PHDwin, do type curving, and then apply the correct deducts, sensitivities, pricing for that area to come up with an offer. And so where PHDwin 3 has been very handy is the use of qualifiers and scenarios to do sensitivity analysis, to reference in the type curves that I've already created for different areas. And so, but especially the qualifiers and the scenarios, how those are newly used in PHD3 has streamlined that workflow as we look at stuff all over the place. So.
Well, that's great. That's great. I think that is I would say the best demo we have on version 3 is to open up a database, have those scenarios set up where you can have like a high forecast, low forecast, high price, low price, to quickly be able to flip between them. Just by flipping the scenarios, you flip out those deck of qualifiers, That's how me and Nikhil demo the program often. And then in Build 18, as you know, you can now do the quick access bar, and I just have the scenario drop down permanently pinned to the top of my PHDwin, so I can just easily flip between those. So that way, I can easily see, this versus that when I'm looking at the graph. Or if I run out reports, I can just run out the report for that particular set of qualifiers. So
absolutely. And so for my setup, I have a 1 minute analysis database for smaller deals, and then larger deals, I created a new database for each larger deal. That's how I have it currently set up. But because most of my time spent in the analysis side for the smaller pieces, I really have a nice setup, just how I like it on the graphing, and the just the user interface is customized just how I like it. And so I like the flexibility V3 offers over V2 in that way too.
So you've gotten the point where it feels like home to you, huh? You've got it all customized. You got your new muscle memory, right? Yeah. So you don't have any days you wake up, man, I wish I could go back or whatever, right? You're officially on.
I sometimes go back as the database given to me, requires it, and then there's relearning how to use V2 in some instances, and I most miss the forecasting shortcuts and the speed of forecasting in V3 when I'm forced to go back into V2. So it's just a lot more intuitive in V3. The ability to use your arrow key shortcuts to adjust the decline and position the forecast on the chart just really makes it quicker.
That was one of the biggest requests that we had in version 2 era, was to have those shortcuts. So we made sure that was baked in the crust for day one with V3. And, it's customizable. So if you don't like what it is, you can go and you can remap them. And I think a lot of people don't even know that that's there. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that does really make things work quicker. So earlier in the year, Brandon, me and you talked, and I kind of, you're going to be on PHDwin Week again. Yeah. And then I was like, hey, by the way, what would you like to see in version 3 this year? And one thing that you point out is you'd like to see a better Aries conversion, a better Aries import. So we've had it, I think, better than V2 from the start. But this is something that we've really wanted to improve. Earlier in PHDwin Week, Hunter got on and he gave a presentation about importing into V2 and V3 and Aries database. And so now that we have that capability literally in our office, he has been doing a really good job of passing over to the QC team any kind of issues that come up with that conversion. And so he gave me a little cliff notes for you, Brandon, real quick. I just want to run through these. So on Monday, we're going to put Build 19 on the website. Build 19 is going to have a lot of new features in it. We're going to finally have a variant sort so that you can compare the actuals versus the projection. Once it does an auto fit, plus there'll be a report that does that. We'll have monthly volume export coming back, which was a huge win for me. That's the thing I asked for the most. But I asked Hunter to give me a little breakdown of what's going to improve in the Aries import in Build 19. And he gave me 3 key points. One is for projections. The common setup for lookup tables is to apply base parameters to projection and then adjust them based upon things like lateral length. 19 is now able to import the projections with those adjusted parameters. So the lookup table type and lookup table, like the following the path, it can now do that better. With taxes, now it's going to actually update the tax models as it imports from Aries. And so that way, if it pulls in something that wasn't in the database, it'll create a Texas 2 tax model, where before it was just kind of going with our default. And then in investments, in Aries, you can use functions to calculate an investment value, but you have to pull that from the master table, and then you have to do the math on top of it. Build 19 is going to be doing that automatically. So these are 3 big improvements that you'll see Monday for the Aries import. And hopefully it'll make your life easier, Brandon. Hopefully that's a little bit of what you're hoping for Christmas, right? We can play a little early Santa Claus here and make it so that you can get those files in easier. And then always just let everyone know if you need some more help than that, we do have Hunter here at the office that are willing to do an Aries conversion, as we talked about earlier this week. We'll have Courtney Stevens on in a bit, QED Energy Associates. They're the absolute best at doing conversions both into PHDwin and out back into Aries. So you can always get that extra help. We're always trying to improve the tool. And I thank you for that feedback, Brandon, about to make version 3 better. Let me ask you a question for right now. Where do we go next? What would you like to see next from version 3?
I'd like the more I can do type curving inside of PHD V3, the better. And I know there's some applications and modules, but specifically as I import data from Inveris, I'm not always confident that the lateral length and some of that data that you use to normalize is actually accurately pulled in all the time. And then when I'm trying to do the type curving, it's a button press as it is now, but understanding more what that button press is and really being able to document the type curve process as I, responsible for the type curving and the product I put out, really being able to work through step by step to make the type curving process more streamlined inside of V3 would be great. I sometimes use the current module within V3, but often I find myself going back to Tableau or Spotfire to do some of that work and then bringing that output into V3. So the more that I can do some of those, because I already do all my projections, et cetera, for the type curve data set within V3, but I have to take it out, bring it back in, just so I can make sure I understand each of those steps to get a good answer that I can rely on.
So one thing I speak to is talking about transparency there. We really want to make sure that as we upgrade our ability to make type curves, our auto fits, and adding different functions there, that we are very transparent about those changes and what we're doing with it. The previous presentation, Dad from Haas was talking about the dangers of a black box and just trusting some magical algorithm, right? That's not, as you know, Brandon, that's not the way we do it. We want to make sure engineers have a lot of controls there. So as we're talking about improving these processes, we talked about adding in new fields, adding in new controls, especially whenever you're first pulling in data to make sure things get set up properly. Wells that are obviously shut in don't have forecasts on them, that whenever we do have good data, to set up wells properly, to make sure that earlier this week, the first day of PHDwin week, D&M did a great, Gordon Naughton did a great presentation where they used physics-based analysis. They used a lot of different types of data to figure out what the best setup was for doing those forecasts. And in particular, they were looking at something called QDB. I don't know if you caught that, but the rate decline B setup. That's something that we are very interested in. We've been having conversations with them. What we think would be best is when we pull in that Embarrass data, we pull in that data from these vendors, that we do a better job of giving more controls on the front end of how did those auto fits work. And then we do a better job of setting these cases up properly. Like if they need to be a water oil ratio case, why don't we build it that way? If we can tell from the data that maybe there needs to be a different phase configuration there, why aren't we picking that automatically? Why isn't that built in as part of the defaults? So that is one thing that we're really looking forward to going into next year for PHDwin. And that's one thing that's really nice about working with partners. You were talking about doing things in Tableau and Spotfire. So earlier in this week, we, what works, what doesn't, what we'd be willing to take on and so forth. And so that's part of the reason why I started the developer program, was to be able to open up our data to these other vendors. So that way, if you want to go with another solution to build curves, you can, and then have them come in and flow in naturally, but also to kind of have this bigger discussion. So that way, if we do see best practices, we do see things like what Gordon Naughton's doing that we really think we could improve the industry, we're going to try to bake that into future versions of 3. Also, Brandon, I really think once you get 19, you'll have to report back to me, but once you get 19 and you see what I call the magic handlebars, you're just going to be ecstatic. I mean, I know you've had it happen before where you have that graph in 3 and that rightmost bar is off the graph and you just want to drag that thing. You just want to pull it in or whatever. But how do you do it? We figured it out. We figured out how to put it's like a midpoint handlebar there. So whatever you see view, you get a little handlebar there still on the rightmost part. So that way you can still adjust and move things around. I know you do a lot with the keyboard, but sometimes it's just easier to just grab it and pull it in, but then you scale, drag, and all that, right? So hopefully those magic handlebars will make your life a little bit easier, especially whenever you're doing that fast analysis. As we get into changing what we're doing with type curving and those inputs and all that, I'll be sure to reach out to you. You're always a key person here at TRC as far as someone that we go to ask those kind of questions to and to run by. You're what I call a flagship client. There's certain people in this industry that we've learned to really trust, like a you and a Courtney Stevens and a Dwayne Purvis and a Jim. I'm actually about to bring all these people on, right? And we really appreciate over the years, Brandon, how you've been just a great friend of TRC. You've taught me a lot. You've taught us a lot about where we need to go and what our best practices are. And so thank you very much for jumping on with me today. Thank you for being willing to, be part of our ongoing conversation and to make, PHDwin V3 the best product it can be, because we built it to be the long term, right? As you know, that's why it's based on SQL, and we use all the new Microsoft technology because we want this thing to be a 10+ year platform. But we know that, right now that still needs more. There's still more that's left to do. And so we'll be reaching out next year, and we'll be asking you for more feedback. But for now, congratulations on your work at Giant Capital. And thank you so much for your presentation last year. A lot of people have really found that useful to get an idea what it's like to get into V3. And thank you for being willing and to do that update. If you don't mind, I think next what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in Courtney Stevens, and we're going to broaden this conversation some. So we're just going to keep broadening this conversation throughout this hour. The idea is that if you have any questions in the audience for anyone that pops up right now, whether it's Brandon, Courtney, whoever, go ahead and email us, events@phwin.com. You got questions for me? Why don't we do X or Y? You heard what Brandon's suggestion was. You got your own suggestion for version 3? Send them over to me, events@phwin.com. I'm going to keep an eye on it. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Courtney Stevens, and we're going to chat with her a little bit